listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katee Van Horn.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast. This is Jackye Clayton.
And this is Katee Van Horn.
Welcome.
Good morning, good evening, good night.
Did you notice how I said my name like a question? This is Jackye Clayton, kind of.
Maybe.
This is Jackye Clayton.
It's early in the morning. We're not really sure, so it's hard to say what our names are.
What we do know is we will have job security forever because... Was that a good segue into the topic?
It sure is.
We're going to be talking about why diversity programs fail. And in fairness, there's success in different areas, but there are definitely some pieces that need a lot more work than others.
Absolutely. So, I think you're spot on. There is such a need for these programs, but I always am interested when I'm speaking to folks, and I'm still trying to justify for my CEO or my whoever in the C-suite that we need to do this work. And after I pull all my hair out, I then respond to them and say, there's so many reasons why, but the fact that you're even having to have the discussion with someone at a CEO level of why this is important, that's not a great place to start.
Not a great place to start. And I think that has been with my role. For those who don't know, I am diversity, inclusion, and equity, which is not the way I'm supposed to say it, strategist at Seek Out.
She's a DIE strategist.
That's what TJ told me to say it. No, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, not the DIE strategist. One of the things we talked about was how it's really nice that the clients that I work with, none of them I have to explain why it's important. They've already deemed that it's important in some way, so much that they're willing to invest, and they would like additional training on how they can move forward. But I think we bring an interesting perspective because I primarily work with talent acquisition, HR in my group. And I feel like a lot of who you work with are in that piece, but also at more of an executive level. Am I wrong in that? I always think of that. That's what I tell my friends anyway.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And, as you said, this topic could be, why did diversity and inclusion programs fail? But I think really it's more talking about kind of here are the things that can happen, the landmines that you should be aware of as you're doing this work. And so, yeah, as I'm talking to executives, as I'm talking to the head of HR, whoever it might be, talking to them about, what should we do and how should we do it? And, what's the process? And there's so many things that can go wrong anytime you're implementing any new program. But the biggest one and one that I think we talk about quite a bit in this space, and, you and I are in industry groups together, and it is that the first piece is really that budget. Are folks actually going to put a budget against this, or are they going to make it the work of folks that are from underrepresented groups, because that's often where the work falls, to say you need to do this work as part of your day job or on top of your day job, which is not fair in any way, shape, or form. And so the first piece, and this isn't a sales pitch to be clear, but having a budget and having someone dedicated or a group or team dedicated to doing this work is so critical to actually being successful. And I think that's one that this kind of goes to what we had talked about earlier of, earlier as in before we started recording, Jackye and I were just talking about kind of like, where should this work report to? And so I think that's just another piece to it. But when you think about kind of from a recruiting perspective, what are the things that kind of go wrong in regards to diversity or hiring, not even calling it diversity hiring from underrepresented or historically marginalized groups?
I think the biggest piece is that without looking at not just the culture of the organization, how we got to where we are today, but the subcultures within the organizations are important, and having a blanket strategy that is supposed to lay on top of all of those various groups. Like I always feel like it reminds me of like Zumba class where the teacher's like, your leg needs to be higher. And there's somebody in the front who's barely moving their leg. And then there's someone in the back whose leg is like behind their head. Like I can't move any, any higher. And you have this blanket standpoint. And then there's the people in the middle. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. For example, they'll say, oh, well, we made the decision to hire more women in our organization. And then you look at your marketing department, your human resources department, your support function, and it's almost all women. And they're missing the point of diversity. It's not understanding the point, what it should look like. And I think we've talked about it for so long in organizations. People think they know what it means, but they aren't taking the time to find out what it means within the organization, breaking that down versus the different business groups in the organization, and then having a strategy for each of those groups of how we're going to move forward. That sounded pretty deep. But
yeah, no, I think that's spot on, because that's also a conversation I have with like frontline leaders is look around the table of your team and who isn't there. So for a marketing leader, it might be, actually, we need to hire men, or actually we need to hire whatever. And because, as you just mentioned, like HR, marketing, sometimes accounting are dominated by women. And so it is that trade-off. But then, when you look at your engineering or your product teams, things like that, it's usually very male dominated. And so how do you flip that? And how do you start looking at that? I think that is one, just like it is the, like, know where you're at and kind of starting with that assessment piece of like, what's your baseline? What are the things that you're doing already? Where are you at today? Because I think companies are at different places. And to your point, it isn't just a one size fits all when it comes to diversity. You have to really start from where you are to move further. And the kind of analogy that I give to folks, and this is for individuals and for teams, is when you're on a journey, like, picture a road that's a winding road up, up a mountain, and every one of the team members is going to be a different place in that journey up the mountain. And every team is going to be in a different place. And so like thinking about that as you think about the journey and really this work, because there is no end, the work is really, how do you move further down the road or further up the hill?
I agree with you completely. And I also think the other piece is that we have to recognize the mental health aspect to this type of work, because things get kicked up. And it's always weird to me. And I still, even though I've been doing this for a while, get shocked when someone will want to tell me some story in regards to their journey of understanding diversity. And you have to become a counselor. And it has never not happened where we're talking about hiring software engineers, and then someone tells me like they went to an all-Black funeral once and they want to tell me how they understand what diversity is. Or, they were in Hawaii and they felt so weird because they were all, and it's like, thank you for making me feel really uncomfortable on my side. Because it's like, what are we talking about? We went from doing the strategy work, and then we had these other pieces. And so what it tells me is that we have to give people a place to start dealing with the unconscious bias, because through the whole recruiting process, it comes up. I think there's a part that we need to let our candidates know, and we have to, I am pretty pragmatic. I'm a very emotional, pragmatic person, if you can be both. But it's like, you're looking at it, we have a job that we have to do, and we have to be able to get there. There's a place for everything, but it's also understanding, if we're going to look at this as a job role and something that's important in order to make this work, what do our job descriptions look like? And how do we communicate with people? When I recruit diverse talent, I always tell them that I'm being hired to hire underrepresented people. And it's important for them to know. And I lay it all out there. And most candidates say nobody's ever done that before. Like, I'll be like, hey, this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation with 25 recruiters that's willing to pay me, and it additional, $50,000 to find one person who looks like me. So what does that tell you about the organization? It should tell you they don't have the resources internally. This is something brand new, the layout, because, no company wants to let go of their money. And so letting the candidate know what could potentially happen, because we can have this revolving door as well, because we're not doing enough work internally within organizations to have the culture set in a timely manner. I spoke to a company that have lost 61 Black software engineers within the last 2 years. And most organizations haven't been able to find 61 Black software engineers that they've been able to negotiate and hire into their organizations. And I was like, we shouldn't even talk about adding people to your team. Let's talk about who is leaving, what division were they working on, who hasn't left, so we can try to figure out where the problem actually is.
Okay, so you just said like a bazillion things that I want to comment on, because I think all of it was good stuff. So thank you. So
yeah, let's break that down.
Let's break that down a scotch. So the comment that you made about like people wanting to share their stories of their own diversity or their own experience around this topic, I think part of that is almost the, oh, well, I have a Black friend. Or the, oh, well, yeah, it is a confessional situation, but it's also, let me explain to you why I'm not a racist. Let me explain to you why I'm actually a really good person. And I think part of this is also this fear of the term racist is so charged. And when you think of racist, you immediately go to KKK, burning crosses, like the worst possible scenario.
You do, Katie. Let's be clear.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. I think that a lot of folks think that. And so
yes.
To say I am a racist feels really uncomfortable. But I think I also can say, because of the experiences, because of what I have gone through, because of how I was socialized from day one, birth forward, do I have things in my mind that are racist? Absolutely. And so it is creating that awareness, creating those kind of countermeasures to say, okay, the critical thinking, and it's exactly what we're saying on bias. How do you think about your bias? Being aware of your bias is actually how you stop it. So when you start to go, oh, well, I believe this about this situation, then having that critical thinking of, why do I believe that? Is it true, or is it something that I was socialized to believe? And so I think even just the term racist or bias, all of those things, that people feel uncomfortable if they're described as having these tendencies or having these beliefs. It's like, okay, we need to understand that part of this is, yes, you are. Yes, you do have bias. Yes, you are racist or have racist beliefs or have grown up socialized with racist beliefs. Maybe you've learned differently, and hopefully you're growing and questioning that. So there's that piece.
Yeah.
And then, thinking about kind of the tax, the mental well-being of folks. You and I have talked about this. We've talked about this before on the podcast, of folks in marginalized groups having to pick up the slack, having to do this work on top of their day job, having to have that kind of, mental tax, whatever the word is. Like, I think we've used a couple different words to describe this, but having to do the work. And then again, the white colleagues going, okay, that's cool. That's something that you all have to deal with, versus no, as white people, we have to deal with it and we have to make the changes. This should not be a person of color thing. This should be an everyone together. But mostly it needs to be white people going, what systems, what tools, what ways have we set this up to advantage ourselves and keep others down?
I don't, and it's funny because I don't even think, you and I were in that meeting with a particular client when they were talking about how I was taught to trust everybody. Remember? I was taught to trust everybody until they give me a reason not to. And I said, I was raised to not trust anybody until they give me a reason to.
Right.
So we automatically would have a clash, right? And it's understanding. People need to understand the system, how it is related to them, but they also have to understand that does not make, because I'm Black doesn't make me an expert on whatever. Todd, say hi. On whatever piece that you.
For those that are just
dealing with
listening
right
and
now.
not watching, Todd just made a cameo appearance on screen.
Sorry, edit.
And so did the puppy. No edit.
And the puppy. But I think, that's the part that's I feel like that's why you need at least two diversity people and people with different places, because if I'm having to counsel all of these people as we're going through the work, we're never going to get everything done. And I generally like when you have self-work, self-awareness. This is where it's like a knowledge base. If this is what you're feeling, these are some things that that can help you, or some topics you might want to bring up with, insert social worker name,
your therapist,
your
therapist
that you have to work through.
Yes.
And also, it's also why you need professional people to be able to do this work. Even with, I think it's funny that people will just, because, oh, you're Black, you must know what it's like for all Black people and all white people, and you can counsel me on how I'm supposed to act. And we all are products of our multiple experiences. And so whatever you're dealing with, people are dealing with, has to do with a lot of stuff that doesn't have to do with the four walls that you're working in. And I think that can get in the way because we'd rather just shut the door on it. I mean, I think it's easier for me to get through the day if I could just ignore it.
So yes, and again, this is kind of another piece of why do diversity programs fail? And there has to be that first person. There has to be that first underrepresented person. And you have to be extremely careful about how that person is onboarded, is taken care of, is kept safe, because to your point, they can become tokenized right off the bat and can be made into can you tell us, for all Black women, what is the experience like for X?
Welcome to The Human Role, your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
And that obviously is a completely unreasonable question, but also is, well, it's not very smart. like I can't speak for every white woman in the world. I don't want to right now because that 55%, but also but also that's not a sensible question. And so I think that, protecting that first or that only until you do grow and continue to recruit. But then it's also, to your point on why did 61 people leave? This is where, I know we always come back to that inclusion piece. It's kind of you have to clean up your house before you start inviting guests over. And this is if you have an environment where a person of color, any type of marginalized person is going to come into the organization and feel tokenized or feel like, wow, I'm the only person here and this is really awkward. How do you help them through that until you can get more? But then also, what are you doing? What are the things you're setting up? Because this is the other thing that happens, and this one sends me straight over the edge, is we tried diversity and it didn't work. And that's where you go into, and that's, the excuse of, oh, we hired a woman into management and she didn't work or she left, so we should just stop trying to do that. Or we hired a Black person or whatever, fill in the blank of whatever, group they want to discuss. And then it's like, okay, well, one person, again, does not represent everyone, but what have you done to clean up your house to make sure that when you do hire anyone, period, like it doesn't matter what their identity is, how are you making them and their experience great so that they can be successful? How are you setting them up for success versus, hey, I brought in this person that's from an underrepresented group. Let's see how they do. And, and not really giving them the resources or the support that they need. And even more so in today's environment, the support of people working from home, of onboarding folks, of making sure that you are thinking about the things that are going on outside of, as you said, those four walls and how that might impact that person day to day. Like we have to be doing that as an organization to actually make sure that it is successful.
Well, you bring up another point of why they fail. It's because they are what I think maybe we as DEI pros have forgotten to tell people is that it's not going to be pretty and it's not a kumbaya moment. The anticipation is that there will be conflict, and out of that conflict will be the innovation and the realization before you get that kumbaya moment. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been on a board of directors and you have your board retreat where you have your annual planning of what we're going to do. And everyone starts out nice and you share stories about families and your favorite book. And then you start talking about, okay, how are we going to save the world? And everybody has a different opinion, and then you want to kill each other. And then at the end, you're like hugging and crying because this was so great. It's like that within the organizations. And it takes generally at least a year of conflict, of safe conflict. Like I'm going to allow you to speak your mind, and we're going to work on those things without any knee-jerk reactions until we can work through it in order to see the success. I think it's funny for, like, I will follow Katee into a desert without a canteen. I will also follow her straight out of the desert with a gallon of water. Because we're close. And part of that is because we do have that same belief system. And so I think we forget that within these organizations, I bring that up to say, like, the reason that we have people that are different is so that we don't have just blind followers in one way or another. That's what gets in the way of innovation. It's the fact that nobody has said, hey, that's kind of racist. You put girls and men in your software code and there's no women available. That's kind of sexist, because there wasn't a woman on the team to say anything, right? And it's the mutual admiration society that actually halts innovation. I firmly believe that the reason that we have the electric light is because someone got sick of sitting in the dark and made mention of it. It was like, if you don't go figure out a way that I can, cook dinner, and when the sun goes down, I'm out. Right. And so somebody had to figure it out. So within these organizations, it's like, we need to figure out a way to get this done. We have to figure out a way to get along. We have to figure out how we can build this. And it's a microcosm of the world we live in. That's why diversity works. A diamond, you have to have pressure on that lump of coal, and it's not fun for the piece of coal, but that diamond sure is pretty, if that makes sense. And so we tell people it's better, you're going to grow, you're going to have all these things, but we don't coach our hiring managers, our leaders about how to deal with the conflict that will arise. It will arise because now you have somebody who is not necessarily like you that's coming in and finding conflict that you didn't want to hear because you hired people that were like you in the first place.
Agreed. And I think you're making me think of a couple different situations that I've been in. The first one being just I I kind of chuckle, and not in a good way, but kind of chuckle when I have leaders like, my whole team is upset, and, oh my gosh, I can't believe, they feel like this or this going through these process. When we go through the strategy implementation of how do you become more inclusive? How do you become more diverse? How do you create these systems of equity? There is pain. And when the leaders get to that point and they start to hear stuff from their employees, a lot of times they're like, we need to stop this. We need to slow down. We can't do this. And it's the, don't worry, like, this is part of the process,
That's
like,
right.
In order to grow, there has to be some pain. When you were little and your bones would hurt, and, your parents would say, hey, you're going through a growth spurt. It's that similar situation where you are going to have places within this conversation that
Todd is
in the kitchen.
Todd's in the kitchen.
It's good. But you're going to have places of discomfort as you grow, as you continue to build out these cultures that you want to have. But it's not always fun. Telling someone, hey, you have bias, if they don't believe that they have bias, telling someone that your beliefs are wrong, you have to change your behavior, that doesn't feel great. But I also would say, Jackye, I will never take you into the desert without having water. I will always make sure that you have water when you come to Arizona's desert. I'm just letting you know.
My friend, is allyship in a different episode.
Very good allyship. I will not let you die of dehydration in Arizona, because it's the whole, you can't go, okay, hey, you did this bias training and now you're cured. It's that whole concept of your bias is there, ingrained in you since birth. It doesn't just you go to a 2-hour class with the amazing Katee Van Horn and now you're cured. That's not, I would love that to be the case.
I would love it if it was a 6-hour class. If it was a 6-month class.
Well, but
it doesn't work that way.
No, but it is to your point on the 6 months, it is a long drawn out process of being aware of your bias. And again, checking yourself when you're driving in your car and someone cuts you off and you start, naming all the reasons why that person who's a woman, who's a whatever, is the worst driver ever. And all of the things that go through your mind, that's your bias.
Yes. And that's the part that people don't get. Like, your unconscious bias, you're like, oh, I don't like this, this, and this. No, the fact that you said that means it's conscious. It will not come out until the situation came out. Like, I always talk about the fish in the microwave never came out. Nobody talked about all of the things that went along with that. For those of you who haven't heard the story, it was about an organization that made a rule that you couldn't cook fish in the microwave without recognizing that they just totally took away this whole person's culture and basically made it a very uncomfortable environment to work in for everyone. And we also couldn't bring McDonald's French fries in either, which whatever.
That seems sacrilegious. That does not seem like
because
bias.
It was like, well, it's another day.
Trust
me. But I mean, the thing is that I was sitting on a board. Let me tell you a story about this. This cracked me up. Let me tell you a story. So I was on a board. I was the only Black woman on a board. The woman was full of women. And someone said, I don't see color. And because, I'm subtle and shy and don't like speaking up, I was like, hey, since you don't see color, it's really important for me to tell you something. I'm Black. And if you need to write it down so you can acknowledge that, and then go ahead and do that, right? Flash forward, I apparently put it on Facebook. Like, if one more person tells me they don't see color and ... fill in the blank. But I never gave it any thought. It was almost a year to the day where she said to me, I understand what you were saying and I apologize. We're still not friends. We were able to work together. We weren't friends, but that was something that I said, and I say a lot when people say I don't see color. Had no idea that bothered her and stuck with her. She had to do her own internal work for a full year, Katee. And me, I didn't give her any other thought after I was like, well, she's not on my Christmas card list. Then I just didn't, she was not in my head. But it took a year of her doing her own self work, not just going through life, to be able to get to the point where now she's able, where you have to have that piece together before you can even start the work. That was at a nonprofit organization. Now imagine that in a corporate environment when you're teaching your these are the biases or things that you have to look at, and you're doing it to 200 people, 300 people, 10,000 people, freaking Starbucks employees. They have to go through all their own work. And if they are in a positions of power, which we know the scales are tipped, and you're making me feel uncomfortable, you're asking me to willingly sit in an uncomfortable place, it is a lot easier to say, we're not doing this anymore. We're firing all these people. In order to get to move forward. So from the HR perspective, from a recruiting perspective in particular, you have to understand that you're dealing with throwing somebody's power off a little bit, taking away their power to feel like they can make their own decisions, asking them to be uncomfortable while still managing the organization. And it doesn't matter. It can be male, female, black, white, people who are disabled. We are pain averse as people. That's why we have to have, have you ever thought about how people make their life on change management? And at one point I was like, is it really change management? And they're like, yeah, that's your whole job, is trying to make people change. You can make a career out of it. And the change is going to like a different stapler company.
Right. It's funny because the way I think about this sometimes, or try to describe this, especially for like engineering teams, if you have been in an environment where you develop products, there are different methodologies to developing products. One is the waterfall method, where team 1 does their activity, then team 2, then team 3, and so it waterfalls down. There's also the agile methodology, with a lot of folks know about, have butchered. I'll probably butcher some of the concepts when I'm talking about it right now, but go with me on this real quick. So in agile method, the leader of the team, so the person with the title on the team, doesn't have that power title anymore, or have that power anymore. They have the title, but maybe not the power. And it's such an interesting thing to watch agile teams develop. And mostly because you have the leader going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. Right. If I'm not the leader of this team, if there's a scrum master, if there's a whatever, where do I fit into this? How am I the person in power? And they're not. And so it's helping them through that. And so that's why when I think about like innovation in teams, once you have that diverse group around the table, how do you make sure that you can have that change management conversation? You can have those conflicts that come up that lead to better innovation and better product and better whatever. That's the other piece that we need to teach leaders. So it's how to be inclusive, how to make sure that they're including everyone in the conversation, but also not going with this is the way we've always done it. Not going with let's have a brainstorming session, but only certain people are allowed to have ideas. There's a lot of different pieces where it's the step back to step forward. And I always think about a diverse team, like starting with a brainstorming session, because of the fact that that's where, you start to have people, you start to see the power dynamics where, whoever was the smartest in the room or thought that they were the smartest in the room maybe isn't anymore, or is being pushed in a different direction. Someone who's used to knowing or having the answer or being the one that everyone listens to. When you have different folks in there with different perspectives that are going, well, no, maybe not. Have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it that way? That's when you get to the better thing, the better brainstorm idea that you actually end up going with and implementing. But that work to get there, like you have to teach your team how to do that. And that's why I always talk about like team agreements. How do you have inclusive team meetings? How do you make sure that your team is in agreement on how they will work together? And it kind of goes back to what you're sharing of like, how do you just make sure that you can do the best work? You can be inclusive. You can have everyone feel like they have a voice, all of those things. Because again, if you don't have that, then you lean on the excuse of, well, we tried that and it didn't work, so now we're just not going to do it anymore. And I've also seen this other phenomenon where it's the kind of the Hail Mary diversity. And what I mean by that is you have I'm going to use product as the example again. You have a product, a project, whatever it is, and no one has been able to solve it. No one has been able to make it work. And then you hire someone diverse as a Hail Mary to go, oh, so-and-so, they should be able to fix this. And we'll give them this chance to fix this. And then when they don't, and like every other person behind them has not been successful in it, but because they are diverse, then the answer is, oh, well, we tried diversity and it didn't work, which is, excuse my French, asinine.
Is that French? I think it's a cine in France.
Yeah, I was going to say a cine. Asinine.
But,
Yeah.
It's funny. I think, and just to bring, because we are inclusive AF, there's also a certain part that has to deal with the age and groups of your team as well, of where you are and what your willingness to mold and change. There's definitely something that happened to me personally once I got past 40 of my flexibility. And in general, I'll just be like, I'm okay with that. Sounds about right. Like, okay, we'll go and do that because of not having to deal with all of the other things. There's a point where it's like, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. I trust you. We're going to just do it. Whereas you'll see some generations that are like, I want to work this whole thing out in my head so that I feel comfortable. You saying it is not enough for me to feel comfortable. And I think another reason why diversity programs don't work is because, it could be your head. I've noticed in organizations, the head, president, CEO, board chair, whatever it is, generally had some work. Most of them have been thinking about doing this for a time, and the money's right, the timing is right in order to start a diversity program, or they went to some weird retreat and they came back and now they want to change the world. In either case, they've had some kind of moment that's caused them to drive the change that nobody else in the organization was a part of. You'll hear people talk about speaking to their spouse that pushed them in a certain direction. And so now they're going to implement this into their companies. And it's like, well, we are now trying to reach this abstract goal of what you have determined diversity should be. And then everybody individually looks at what they think diversity is. I mean, I talked to a client last week and I asked them to define diversity, and some people, you've heard people, the myriad of definitions. And for the first time, the client said Black people, because when we told them diversity, they thought it was women. And now we're at like a 52-48 split, but we don't have any Black people. So I'm not going to tell you that we need to work on hiring diverse. I'm going to tell you we need more Black people in our organization, period. And it was like, now there's like a whole different set of questions and issues. Like, this was the moment. And what does that look like? And what is the outcome going to look like? Because now I was like, okay, you can't just hire Black people. So can you get more specific? It's breaking it down. It's one of those things where within programs for diversity, you have to slow down before you speed up. You have to. And, the other part that I think a lot of organizations, if they are allowing you to do a holistic approach, they don't want to do is, and tell me if you disagree, but a lot of organizations, when I did it, not from just the recruiting standpoint, but it was more of an organization help with diversity, the first thing I did mentally was write up a fire and stay and concern group. Like, literally you can say, you need to fire these people. These are where your gaps are. These people are on the fence that can have training, and these are your champions. Before we even have a meeting, because if you don't do that, we will never be successful. I know that he's your head salesperson and brought 3 million in last year. He's also sexist and racist, and you will never have diversity if he's going to be a part of the organization. It will never work. And you just want to slam the door and walk away because they'll say, oh, but it's about the money. Then it's not about diversity, and you need to be able to move on.
Leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
And so people don't want to see it. And then once they see it, if they still don't want to make change, like from that level, I think it's a challenge. I think with diversity, what I've noticed is that there is your own personal trauma that you're bringing to the table. And then you have your business initiatives and your business needs, and how are we going to do that? And then your organization and how it fits into the landscape within the various industries. It makes it tough. And so that's why you can't do it in a 1 hour training. At best, the 1 hour training, someone goes, oh, well, maybe I was racist. It's like when you drive a red car and then you go and you see all the red cars. And you'll have these moments where you have to look at yourself and your organization for who it is. And then it kicks up all the dust, right? and people just don't know how to move forward, and it brings up the conflict. That's the main reason I feel is that people are not comfortable with getting uncomfortable, and it gets really uncomfortable and ugly. Many of you that I say many of you, I don't know who's listening, all of you. I'm just kidding.
Every last one of you.
There are definitely characters in me and Katie's lives. Their names come up all the time. I talk about Todd all the time, but another person that's important in my life is Jeremy Roberts, who's been an ally for me for a very long time. And he's had some interesting life experiences that he brings to the table. And one of the ones that come up a lot is him talking about his family in Arkansas and like the trailer park and all these things. And as he was studying in college, like peace studies, and like traveled the world to help super marginalized groups that we can never even envision, would have moments thinking back to, Uncle whatever at the kitchen table talking about a particular group and having to reconcile, but I love my uncle, but I'm pretty sure he was a racist. Or does that make me a racist? It's like people think racism is contagious. And then bringing that to work, I feel must be the equivalency of me coming to work, being afraid of being angry because of something happened in my life and being perceived as the angry Black woman, and I'm not, like being afraid of being completely transparent and feeling safe, I think happens. I can only imagine. I've never been white before, so I'm just making this up. But when you have that realization of, oh, that's not cool, and there's a lot of things in my life that aren't really cool, and I don't know how to bring it up and how it affects my decisions, I think happens. You're white, yeah. Katie. Tell me about that.
Well, actually, when you say that, like the experience that I think about, and it's one that I've actually talked about to a few folks recently, and the folks that were included in this meeting, I will not name names to protect the guilty.
Good idea.
But in one of my prior roles, I was at a high level in HR, and was like the number 2 HR person, and was invited to a meeting with an outside vendor because we were doing our employee branding and like a refresh of the jobs page, etc. And so they brought me in because I knew the team, all of our employees extremely well, was very connected to the leadership, etc., etc. So as a thought leader, as a partner in this work, as a what's the voice of the employee, I was brought into the conversation. And the group that was there asking questions, 2 men, and then the other 2 people in the room on our side of the table were my chief people officer and someone from the recruiting team. And the outside vendor asked a question. I started answering it and was interrupted first by the chief people officer, who said, "Oh, what Katie means is blah, 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 blah." And I just looked at him and I let it go. Well, then second question comes up and started to talk again. Here's this and this. These are some things to think about, whatever. And then the recruiting person jumped in and said, "Well, like what Katie's trying to say is," and I said, "Okay, guys." I said, "So do you need me here or did you want to go ahead and speak for me?" And the vendor got extremely uncomfortable. I'm sure the 2 gentlemen who were sitting with me also got uncomfortable. Yeah, sure. But it was one of those situations where, to your point, like, do you sit there and stay quiet because you don't want to come across as whatever and have this impression of you of like, oh, that's the, bitchy Katie who's gonna, be domineering or aggressive, because that's the one that people always like to use for women. And it was like that moment of, this is not okay. And I especially sitting in a room where we're talking about the branding of our culture.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, you two, you know better, and this is not okay. And so, after the meeting, we all kind of huddled up and I said, what was that? Like, what happened there? Because you guys know, I'm not going to let that slide. I will be giving you the side eye. I'm watching. I'm always watching. And they both like kind of, did the, yeah, oh, wow. We're sorry. We didn't even think about it. I'm like, no, I get it. I'm like, that's the kind of, you're ingrained to be the, okay, I'm going to be the voice. I'm going to tell you the things, but this is exactly what we're talking about. It's like, how do you make sure that marginalized people don't have something that is instilled upon them that is some age-old belief, stereotype, whatever you want to call it, but also how do you create these environments where you can get better answers, get better results by having all the voices in the room. So I want to talk about another one, and this is a good recruiting one too, because I always like the good recruiting ones just to see if your head explodes. So the idea of a pre-employment test or a hiring test, if you will. Mm-hmm. Tell me your thoughts, Jacqueline.
I think
her head did not explode. However, I do see steam coming out of her ears.
I hate them. Tears. I feel like there's so many things that are snapshots. I will tell you, I got a lesson in that. I used to work for Robert Half, and I don't mind mentioning them by name because they're going nowhere. So I used to work there. And we used to do pre-hire assessments for job skills, and it seems so, I'm almost embarrassed, honestly, because it doesn't even make sense. Before we even met with them, they would have to take these tests. We determined, because we were experts, what tests they needed based on the needs of our clients. And I remember giving a potential candidate these tests. Later, maybe 6 months, we talked about it. They're like, well, you never had me in the role that I initially applied for. Why are you coming back to me now? And I was like, well, the reason we didn't was because of the results of this particular test. But the scores on the other ones made it seem like this other job was a good job for you. And they had to do the tests in person, PS. So it turned out, what I didn't know was that their grandmother had died that day. They had gotten a ticket and were afraid that they were going to be late. Still were able to get to the meeting on time, but were rushed through because we had like 2 computers and like 40 people coming in, and that the tests were a reflection of where it was, and they wanted an opportunity to take the test again. That was the last day that I ever thought anybody should ever have to take a test ever in life. Because it's a snapshot of where people are and their experiences, and what difference does it make if you're going to be training people in a certain style. Like you can't, companies are dynamic, they move, they change. And it's like, can this person, we're not looking at the right thing. We should be looking for people who aren't the same, so we know we can push the needle. And I remember working with a client, they said, well, we want people just like our top people. And I was like, why wouldn't you want people better than your top people? Like, if they're all the same, what could we add? It's like, look, you don't have any people that have identified as trans on your team. What if somebody on your team was trans and it pushed the needle and you increased the whole sales team by 1%? And they just looked at me like, can that happen? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Let's find out.
So I hate pre-employment testing. I don't like tests anyway. What do you think about tests?
So I was hired for a role and had to take what's called the Thirststone test. And
I've never heard of the Thirststone test.
Well, don't worry. It should be thrown out the window. Because as I was taking it as an HR person, I'm sitting there going, this is a very bizarre questionnaire. Because it was things like, how do you get a home run in baseball? How, just almost like, remember back in the day when Google had if you have a round manhole, how do you, why should the manhole cover be round, and weird stuff like that?
Yes.
So it was those types of questions. And as I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, yeah, no one outside of the US could take this test because it wouldn't make any sense. Because all of the questions were so US centric, but also it was one of those, has this proven out? And so I think the other piece with these tests is to your point, well, we want to hire people like our top performers, but there's also this piece where this testing comes in and they don't ever do a validation of the results. So they're just randomly have people taking these tests, and there's no tie back to how did they perform? How long did they stay with the organization? All of these things. And so it's such an arbitrary thing. And to your point, so you're okay, well, you had to get a score of it was a 50-point thing. So it was you had to get a 47 or above or whatever. I believe I got a 49, to be clear, because I'm fancy. I know how to get a home run in baseball, FYI.
Congrats.
So these are the things I know.
Never played baseball a day in her life.
Yeah. To be able to do HR, I needed to know the answer to that question. Anyhow, so it was one of those, I was sitting there, taking this test, this is just bizarre. And so then, oh yes, you did, you passed the test. Everything's great. You're going to be hired, yada, yada, yada. And I remember a few years later, someone's was asking about this test. And at that point I was doing everything I could to let's not do that anymore. Why do we need to do this? Why have we even validated these results? No. None of these things have been proven out. And once we finally got rid of it, I went back and looked at my test, because I was it just was so bananas, and no rhyme or reason to the questions. So that's my other point. It's just have they actually validated the results? And I think in some circumstances, sure, maybe they have. But to your point, is your top employee truly the top that you can get? Is that really the best that you can do? And where is the bias in the test? Meaning, if I'm outside of the US, it'd be like someone asking me about cricket. I would have no answers to any of those questions.
Not one.
I barely was able to do the baseball one. Not really. I'm just kidding, but you know what I'm saying.
No, but you bring up, there's something to add to that because I'll let you in on a little secret. Tell me. If you have a number one,
you have to say it quietly.
If you have a number one salesperson, that's a little too quiet.
That's too quiet.
If you have a number one salesperson that gets praise and reward for being that number one salesperson, you will never go past your number one salesperson.
Right.
Not never. And your number two if you don't treat them like you do number one, is out and will go be number one someplace else. You will never, this is the secret that they don't tell you. You really don't want people like your number one salesperson. You want the exact opposite in order to create that competitive environment, to throw it completely on its head, or else you won't grow. You just won't grow. And everybody will only go as high as that person. It just is the way that it happens. And the people that are trying to compete with that number one person will not share the information because they feel like it's unsafe and maybe they're doing the wrong thing. So you'll never even be able to see how people grow to get up to that level or beyond. So
to summarize, chopstick drop from Jackye. Throw out your hiring test immediately. Thank you.
Now.
Yes. So those are some of the reasons. I mean, I think you and I could go on and on and on about all of the other reasons. And I would love to, I actually was taking notes this time. So I remember, because what happens a lot when Jackye and I do these podcasts is that we'll come up with these great ideas of what we should talk about next. And then 7 seconds goes by and we can't remember what the heck we needed to talk about. That's part of our charm, folks, FYI.
That's why y'all listen.
This is the joy of Katee. My brain does not function well after 7 seconds of space. So, Jackye.
Yes. Oh, this is the moment.
The moment that I want to know is, okay, so the topic was why diversity programs fail. When you think about what you would tell a CEO tomorrow about what they should do to make sure that their diversity program does not fail, what is that one or first thing that you would tell them?
I would tell them that it's not failing. When you think it's failing, keep failing, fail faster, fail harder, combust, and then you'll see the success of it. The failure is the growth. That's what I would tell them. It's just like when you're working out and you get cramps and you've tried to run a marathon and you're like, what am I doing? That is your growth. What you have to reframe on what your success and failure looks like. And I recognize that when people are upset and they are not sure what to do and they have all of these various feelings, give them the resources, but understand and make sure you understand within the diversity realm that that's going to happen. And that's actually a sign of success because your people are listening, paying attention, internalizing, and actually thinking about the change that's necessary. Gosh, I should run for like mayor or something.
For sure. Like legitimately, I think tomorrow we should go fill out a ballot or whatever. No, not a ballot. I don't know what you do.
No election talk. That was last.
No election talk. Beg your pardon. For me, mine is to relate to them the idea of a product launch. When you're launching a product, you have a marketing budget, you have a plan, you have a strategy, that go-to-market strategy, all of those things. And so thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of a product launch or, relating the two of those, that you have to put a budget behind it. You have to have a plan in place. You have to have steps. Because I think the other piece, and I didn't mention this earlier, but kind of goes with this of, having that plan is also how much your employees can take at once.
That's right.
Because I think a lot of times we try to throw all of the things at them, and any human needs time, as you just said, to process and to grow and to work through the emotions. So the spacing of and the timing of how you work through some of the stuff is so critical. So make it like a product launch and make sure you're putting the time or creating a time spacing change management process.
And iterate.
Oh yes. Iterate for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Inclusive AF podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe, give us a review, tell us how much you love us on Twitter, all of those things. What else should we ask them to do? Tell your friends.
Yes, share. And because we're getting a lot of people listening in and doing those things, and we want to know. And if we suck, we want to know that too.
I mean, I don't want to know. If
I
you
mean,
suck,
it don't
just
lie.
like subtly text me or DM me. Please don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. No, yes, for sure. We want to hear how we're doing. And if there are topics that you want us to discuss, would love for you to let us know. And if you want to be a guest, reach out to us.
Yes.
What is our email address?
It's info@inclusiveaf. I should probably check it. Right?
Yeah. So info@inclusiveaf.com.
Podcast. I think it's inclusive AF podcast. Don't give that.
Okay.
Cut all of that.
We will
Put it on Twitter.
Yeah, we will put in the show notes what our email address is, and we'll actually write it down so we can tell you the next time. So don't email anyone just yet. We'll get back to you on that. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackye Clayton.
Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.